This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Representative Connie Wilson, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, and former Lieutenant Governor Dennis Wicker. Well, we hope you've had a safe and wonderful July 4th weekend, and now you're ready for some red, white, and blue discussion. Our panel this week is going to discuss the latest unemployment reports and how that impacts the economy and job creation, as well as November's elections. Should be an interesting show, so let's get started. For the first time in 11 months, North Carolina's unemployment rate rose in the month of May, ticking up to 6.4%. But there was some good news in the creation of 5,700 new private sector jobs from April to May, and there's some indication that more people entered the workforce and are perhaps hopeful about job prospects. John, you recently wrote a column saying that the current economic climate in North Carolina is actually going to be good news for Republicans come November. Given the increase in unemployment, I want you to tell us why Republicans are so optimistic about their chances during the election.
Well, because unemployment during the last 11 months is down a lot. In fact, it's one of the largest drops in the United States. And furthermore, people used to say, well, the unemployment rate in North Carolina is falling, but that's just a mirage. What's really happening is people are leaving the workforce because they lost access to jobless benefits and so forth. Well, that argument was never very good. But now it's irrelevant because it's not the truth anymore. The truth is the labor force has increased not just last month, but a number of other months. And so as we sit today, North Carolina's labor force has actually gone down less than the national average. And when you throw in the people who left the workforce and came back and left, if you include everybody, North Carolina's rate of employment growth has been 3 times the national average. That's the employment to population ratio. More generally, the economy is up, incomes are up. People in North Carolina, if you look at the polls, do feel better about the state's economy. These are all obviously good news items for the party in power.
But Dennis, you've actually run campaigns before. If jobs is going to be the big issue in the election cycle, and it typically is, the recovery in North Carolina, despite what John has said, has been somewhat lackluster, particularly as it relates to other recessionary periods we've had in the past. How's this going to help the Republicans?
Well, it's true that that our economy has come back slower than most other states' economies. I take a different view of this, Tom. I think that people in North Carolina and really across the country, but in our state, it's really not whether or not North Carolina is doing well. They look at the national economy. I think it is the national economy that really counts. And I think people in North Carolina, if they feel good about the national economy, the party in power in Washington usually does a little better than expected. So I think that's what's going to set up a very interesting election year, because as we know, the national economy is doing better. And as time goes on, we'll see how what impact that does have in November.
But this week, this past couple of weeks, there was a report showing that the first quarter of the year, we actually dropped so far as the gross domestic product and the national economy was concerned.
Right, we took a little dip this past quarter. I think it's the economic news is always mixed. It's fascinating. The governor's been sending out a press release every month, and the unemployment rate goes down. Now it ticks up a little bit because more people are coming into the workforce who used to be frustrated. That happens a lot. Now they're looking for a job, so the unemployment rate goes up. I didn't see any press releases coming out of the governor's office. The second point is that what's fascinating, people aren't talking about what jobs are being created. People aren't still thrilled that they used to make $40,000, $50,000 job with benefits. Now they're making $25,000 a year and don't have any health care, don't have any benefits. Yeah. And the people who are taking those jobs are glad to have a job, but they're not exactly happy with the way the economy is going.
The statistics show that 80% of the jobs that have been created pay less than $33,000 per year.
Right. So people aren't thrilled with their economic situation if they were doing better than that before the recession.
But tying this back into the election again, Connie, particularly as it relates to the legislature in our state. The Democrats have got to capture 3 seats in the Senate and 5 seats in the House in order to be able to overrule a veto or to sustain a veto by a governor so that both houses won't have veto-proof majorities. I didn't explain that very well, but
well, we kind of know what you're saying.
I hope so. Can the Democrats win those 3 House Senate seats and 5 House seats? And if so, what is it going to take for them to do it?
I think something that Dennis said, midterm elections, the other party that the president has, I'm having the same trouble you are, the Republican Party typically does a little bit better. I think with the redistricting the way that it's occurred, I think with the organization, the infrastructure that's there for the campaigns, for the Republican majority caucuses, both the House and the Senate, I think there's a good shot that they can keep, one or both of those chambers will keep their supermajorities.
I think what the Democrats have to do in those 3 to 5 districts, Tom, is they've got to target 3 to 5 they think they can win that are marginal districts. I think they've got to get good candidates, and hopefully they've recruited good candidates to run there. They've got to get a strong message that will pull over those independent voters, and then they got to work like crazy.
And they got to put some money in those campaigns.
And they got to get some money in those targeted districts. If they do all those things, who knows what would happen in a year like this.
John, I was really intrigued by a column that Paul O'Connor wrote a couple of weeks ago in which he said that the best chance the Democrats have in 2016 is to get a large number of registered Democratic voters to switch over to become unaffiliated voters so that they could choose to vote on the Republican ticket in the primaries and vote in more moderate Republicans and throw out some of the more radical Republicans. What do you think of that?
I think Paul has always been a comedian. Though now that you say that the second time, I wonder if he wasn't actually serious.
I think he is serious.
This notion the Democratic Party is dead and you got to give up and go try to influence the Republican primary is very silly. We will have very competitive election for governor. Legislative elections will become competitive, maybe not in 2014, but certainly in the 2018 range they'll be competitive because, you know, there's only so much gerrymandering can do because people move around and people move in, and that starts to deviate from the ideal that was drawn up years before. We're going to have competitive elections in North Carolina for years to come.
All right, for those of you that are saying you'd like to have more NC Spin, I've got some good news for you. You can have additional video content from our panel and other leading opinion makers on our website, ncspin.com. After each show, we take what we're calling the after spin, get our panelists to tell us what they wish they'd said on the show, as well as give comments on other topics. In addition, we've got NC Spin Perspectives posted throughout the week in print and in video. So keep up during the week by visiting ncspin.com. Also catch NC Spin on Facebook and NC Spin Tweets. Balanced debate for the old North State. When we come back, we're going to talk about commerce and jobs.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Baseball players from other countries are considered guest workers here. Baseball, the previous administration and Congress cut a deal in 2006 allowing foreign players to travel freely across the country. Not so for agriculture guest workers. They're vilified for doing work Americans won't, and they face a mountain of red tape just to get here. Shouldn't American agriculture get the same consideration as baseball? Farm Bureau and Agriculture, we keep North Carolina growing.
Your family physician supports Medicaid reform. That's good for North Carolina patients, providers, and taxpayers.
For over a year, we've worked with the Governor and the General Assembly on a plan for responsible Medicaid reform.
The Senate's proposed Medicaid changes are a departure from this plan. Changes that could lead to a decrease in the number of primary care physicians providing care in communities that need them the most.
The destruction of our state's medical home network, a network that prevents unnecessary hospital and emergency room visits,
and disregards the elderly, the blind, and disabled, and the health care they need. Care we're morally and legally obligated to provide.
Now is not the time to disregard the progress we've made. Now is the time for lawmakers to implement responsible Medicaid reform that protects and improves health care for all North Carolinians.
Visit rnchealthcare.com and tell your lawmaker to support responsible Medicaid reform.
The best part about being a member of a Touchstone Energy Cooperative is that it's your Touchstone Energy Cooperative. Learn more about the power of your co-op membership at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
We now return to NC Spin.
I want to continue our discussion about unemployment and economic development. Governor McCrory has signed into law the creation of a new public-private partnership to take over economic development and marketing functions formerly done by Commerce. The Senate vote was 49-0, a rare show of bipartisanship, and Senate Minority Leader Dan Blue explained why by pointing out the recent announcement of job losses in Charlotte. Blue said the important thing is it's clear that Commerce is in a rut, and it's failing miserably in competing for new jobs and creating new jobs in the state. Some of the policies around here are sending the teachers across the border to get jobs, and now we're sending the jobs across the border. And that's something that's frightening. They're the ones up to bat, so we've got to let them take a swing at it, Blue said. Connie, do you agree with Dan Blue and this public-private partnership is the right thing for us to be doing right now?
Tom, Virginia has had a public-private partnership for decades, and it has worked extremely well for them. In fact, it's a lot of times when we have to go head-to-head with them, they do better than we do. This change is extremely important. It's not just the public-private partnership, but it's the whole infrastructure of economic development where there's been more focus for this public-private partnership and doing away with like a bifurcated system that we've had with the regional economic development partnerships. With as much as is on the line right now, it's important to have this change and see how it works.
Chris, Watts Carr, who we all know, was head of the economic development arm for the Commerce Department for a number of years, said we still haven't had a good explanation for why we ought to do this. The explanation that's been given is that we need more flexibility and we need to be able to react more quickly, but we haven't been told that there are that many instances where we haven't, and what the problem really is.
Well, Governor Martin, when he was running against Lieutenant Governor Bob Jordan back in the 80s, called this privatizing Commerce Department a dumb and dangerous idea. I don't know what he thinks of this current form of it, but I think he might have been right back then. I still haven't seen a legitimate reason to do it. There are other states. Connie mentioned Virginia. The state of Indiana just had somebody in trouble who's on this board for steering economic development toward his friends and political cronies. There's been reports about all sorts of compensation issues. We don't know how much these people are going to get paid because their state salary is set, but they can get a whole bunch of other private money. We don't know what happens to the private fundraiser, people who are giving money to this. What do they get any special favors? Do they get to serve on any boards? And all this is because it was really frustrating because, as Watts Carr mentioned, I haven't seen yet a compelling reason. And when you really push Secretary Decker or Governor McCrory, they want to be more nimble, they want to be quicker. One time the secretary even said people need to know one person they can call in North Carolina when they're looking for a job. Well, I thought that was her when they're looking to come to a place. I think we already have that.
Dennis, John Lasseter, who's heading up this new public-private partnership, said we were in a nuclear arms race for job recruitment and that we've got to be more competitive. You were part of the state government process when we got into the business of giving out incentives, tax incentives, and even cash incentives in some instances, to companies to locate here. If we're in a nuclear arms race, does this mean we're going to see a greatly expanded competitive amount of money, that we're going to be proliferating with more incentives than we have?
No, I don't think it'll be a nuclear arms race. Quite frankly, I'm one of those folks that likes the idea of this private-public partnership. I do think we need to be more nimble and quicker in our response to potential recruits to come into the state. I can point to the Continental Tire deal down in Wilmington, where they just couldn't get an answer. And they left and went to South Carolina, and those were hundreds of jobs that could have been in North Carolina. Nobody likes incentives, Tom, nobody. But, you know, they're part of this game, and we have to play it. I think we have to be competitive. I think this public-private partnership will sharpen our game and give us a competitive edge we need to get jobs to North Carolina.
John, one point in all of this. A lot of the reaction has been because of thousands of jobs that are going to be leaving Charlotte and moving right across
They're
the
going
border.
to Fort Mill.
Into South Carolina, for all intents and purposes, whether they're moving 10 miles. But there's a distinction between trying to retain jobs that you already have versus being able to give incentives. For South Carolina was giving money to create new jobs. We didn't have the ability to be able to give money to retain jobs. Is that something that we need to get into?
The entire issue is an example of people reading a headline and pushing the panic button and not frankly knowing what they're talking about. We shouldn't be worrying about South Carolina. South Carolina is doing worse than we are. We're adding jobs faster. Our economy is growing way faster than South Carolina.
You did a column on this.
Yes. I understand why South Carolina officials are desperate and throwing money around to attract a few jobs over the border because their policies aren't as good as ours. So we need to focus on what matters. I am absolutely fine with the partnership, particularly because they made sure that public records and open meetings laws will be respected with regard to the expenditure of taxpayer funds. But that's a marketing issue. It's better for North Carolina to market itself more effectively. But right now, there is no reason why we need to emulate South Carolina. They need to be copying us.
All right. After these messages, we're going to talk about a constitutional convention. Should be an interesting discussion.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out. Add your input and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
CCANC is an organization that really tries to help everybody enjoy their moments fishing. They try to help create awareness. They also work on trying to protect our resources so that it'll be there for our children as well.
I think another consistent theme that we all have is we want to leave the resource in better shape than we found it.
You know, CCA do so many different things, be it a habitat project, restoring oysters, maybe working for good conservation and good management, going fishing and sharing a passion for a healthy resource.
There's plenty of fish for everybody. There's fish for commercial guys, there's fish for recreational guys, if it's managed in an effective and scientific way.
We have that world record style fishery here, but we've got to make science-based management the future of our fisheries management policies, and then we'll be moving forward, and our legislature needs to know that.
Become a member today at ccanc.org/join.
North Carolina's fight to keep rivers clean from coal should be free from politics, but Roy Cooper just can't help himself. Even Democrats are saying Roy Cooper's playing petty politics when it comes to coal ash. After telling polluters for years they could continue to pollute North Carolina waters, Roy Cooper's now playing politics as usual with coal ash. Roy Cooper should clean up his act and stop playing petty politics with North Carolina's water. Learn more at carolinarising.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
As we reflect during this July 4th declaration period, gave birth to a new nation, we take stock of where we are. Article 5 of our Constitution declares that 2/3 of the states can call for a constitutional convention to amend our Constitution, and Representative Marcus Brandon from Guilford County has introduced legislation calling for such a convention on campaign finance reform. Dennis, there are a lot of people who believe that our laws really need changing on finance reform, particularly following the Citizens United ruling from the Supreme Court. But they worry if such a convention is actually called, it might lead to even more worrisome changes. What do you think of the idea?
Well, Representative Brandon is correct, and we agree on the issue. Citizens United, I think, was a very bad decision, and money in politics is getting out of hand. We agree on that. But I think we ought to worry if we call a constitutional convention, because that's going to open up a whole new can of worms. You'll be on a slippery slope to nowhere. We will be debating every issue under the sun, gay rights, women's reproductive rights, to guns.
Well, and there are a lot of people.
Fiasco.
There are a lot of people that are even suggesting, John, that if we call a constitutional convention, we ought to address returning to the states a lot of the powers that the federal government has usurped. How worried are you about this idea?
That makes me happy. I was worried until you said that they might do something constructive during the Constitutional Convention. Now I'm changing my mind. I think there is a risk of runaway convention. This has always been the problem, as people have discussed states initiating a convention for decades on a variety of subjects. I think the Constitution should be amended to strengthen the states, for example, on a variety of issues. I do not think we should go in and monkey with the First Amendment, which is what Representative Brandon wants to do. I like him. I appreciate his views on many issues, but I think he's dead wrong on this.
Connie, any chance this is going to pass?
Snowball's chance.
You agree with that, Chris?
Well, what's interesting about this is that Marcus Brandon, who's a more liberal or progressive legislator, there's a move on the right to have a constitutional convention with an organization that's doing it nationally. He's a co-director of the Tea Party Patriots. They want it for a whole different reason. I think I agree with everybody on the panel. There is a way now to amend the Constitution. We shouldn't be amending it or changing it dramatically all the time. It should be difficult to do. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, but there's a process. It's been amended before. It should be amended again, but not in a giant, wide-open convention.
All right. After these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
Where do you go when you need to know? ANC makes it easy for you to get the information you need to make well-informed public policy decisions. Our members are industry leaders who are ready to share their industry-specific insights with you. Want to hear both sides of the story? ANC members can tell you. Just use the ANC member directory as your guide or call us directly. ANC members have the knowledge, expertise, and perspective you need to create public policies that are good for North Carolina. We are ready for your call.
We now return to NC Spin.
We always hear from viewers that one of their favorite parts of the show is one of mine, and that's when we ask our panelists to tell us something we don't know. They get to choose the topic and sound off. Chris Fitzsimon, tell us something we don't know.
A lot of supporters of the actions of this General Assembly have been crowing about a CNBC ranking of North Carolina as the 5th best place to do business in the country. They were saying it supports the agenda and is a ratification of everything that's happening. What they don't tell you is that one of the indicators that CNBC uses is how education in North Carolina is doing. That same ranking dropped North Carolina from 15th in the country to 33rd. So I'm not sure I'd be bragging about the CNBC ranking.
How about that? Connie Wilson, tell us something we don't know.
Well, last week the governor vetoed an unemployment insurance bill, which is interesting because in 2011, Governor Perdue did the same thing. So it seems to be that the governors don't like some of the ideas that are coming out of the General Assembly on UI bills.
But that's interesting because part of the veto was because he didn't like the way the legislature took the authority to appoint the members.
Well, they modified it. They modified it, and that was actually part of the complaints that Governor Perdue also had. In 2011, there was a veto override. That's probably going to happen this time, too.
All right. Dennis, tell us something we don't know.
You remember just a few months ago where the Republican Party was really riding herd on Obamacare. Well, I think now Obamacare is starting to take effect and is showing the results that the president hoped that it would show, that people are getting covered and it is starting to work. I think by the time the election rolls around, we're going to see a reversal and you won't hear so much about it in the campaign. That's because it's working, and I think people are going to realize that when the fall gets here.
John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
Well, I'm tempted to say that what you didn't know is that Dennis Wicker was thinking about getting back into politics because he just said something that only a politician would claim. What I was going to say is people often say that manufacturing is dead in North Carolina, that we used to be a manufacturing state and we aren't anymore. That's not true. About a fifth of our economy is made up with manufacturing. That's the fourth highest ratio in the United States. And we have more manufacturing employees as a share of our workforce than any state in the Southeast. Manufacturing is still a major part of our economy, generates a lot of value.
Well, and a lot of the new manufacturing that's being created just doesn't have as many employees.
No, it doesn't have as many employees as it used to. It's more capital intensive. But the employees that are employed in manufacturing are still doing very well, and there's a lot of value being created. A lot of that money circulates then into the service sector.
So manufacturing is alive and well.
Absolutely.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, read our weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch us on Facebook. We hope you'll join us next week when we're going to talk about the budget the state has passed or not passed, and we'll deal with other issues of interest to the people of North Carolina. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.